When I was a kid, Christmas was my favorite time of the year because of the presents and no other reason. That was it. Now that I'm a little bit older, I like spending time with family. Also really like it because it's like the only time where life slows down even slightly. So I thought it'd be nice to like take this time to reflect back on 2023 before life gets really busy again. This is only going to be personal work. It's not going to be anything that I've done in my day job in animation. I've been making this series of zines for like 7 years, I guess, called Chump. They're just a collection of illustrations and comics and silly cartoons. It's not one continuous story, so every page is something new. And I had some time off at the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, so I decided to make another issue, so Chump 4. I started January with it halfway done, and I got about 8 or 9 pages finished before I started a job at the end of January. And I'm really proud of it. Here are some pages from Chump 4. This one is important because of these 3 characters, Whit, Frankie, and I think Teddy. That name has kind of been up in the air for a while, but I've been playing around with the idea of making a short film about these 3 kids in a band for kind of like 2 or 3 years at this point. In February, I started working on Whit's rig in Adobe Animate, which used to be Flash. And as you can see, it's not completely finished, but I did get pretty far with it. It just doesn't have any hands. But I think like his front and 3/4 view, yeah, it has like all the mate shapes done. So I have like a neutral and a sad and expressions for both of them. And then I think his side view, yeah, I have some of the mate shapes drawn, but I didn't do any of the sad ones yet. I need to like fix up his jaw there. The hands, I have started drawing them, like designing them in Photoshop, but I actually need to rig them in Flash. It's just gonna take quite a while. But the good thing is that all the main characters are gonna share the same mate's hands and eyes. So once I get those done for him, the kind of complicated stuff is done for them as well. I really like how it's looking. I just need to actually get back to doing it. Okay, I had a table at the Artist Alley in Comic-Con in March, and so I repurposed some old art to make business cards. At one point I was thinking about getting this guy like modeled and then 3D printed, maybe a foot tall, so that I could sit zines into his arse to display them, but it kind of never went beyond that. It's just an idea at the moment. Maybe someday. During a lull period at Comic-Con, I drew this mouse carrying a big block of cheese on his back, and I absolutely love how it turned out, and I actually mocked up what it might look like on a t-shirt, which I would love to get printed. It's kind of like really expensive to get into printing t-shirts, so I can't justify doing it right now, but I'll hang on to this idea, and I think someday I will do it. I actually like this design so much that I got it printed onto stickers. In the new year, these will be available on my Etsy, and I'm going to sell them on some markets. I really like how those turned out. Around April, I designed this like thing. I'm not even sure what to call it. It's like a stand for a dog bowl in the shape of a bone. And I actually made it over June for this comics event that I helped organize called the Dublin Comic Arts Festival. And we turned the back wall of it into like a wall of fame to honor all the dogs that have come to DCAF. I recorded the entire process of making it, and I was trying really hard to get a video out before Christmas, but I ended up getting sick in the lead up to it, and so that never happened. So that will come out early in the new year. But I was also commissioned to make another one by someone who had seen the first one, which was incredibly cool. That was my first woodworking commission. It sat permanently in Richmond Barracks, which is like a kind of cultural event space in Dublin. And someone who works there used to bring their dog to work with them, and their dog died this year. So her coworkers asked me to make one as a kind of memorial, and it sat in the lobby, and I didn't know that they were going to put a photo of the dog onto it, which is like incredibly sweet. So that was a cool first this year. Forgot to mention earlier, but the 3 kids in a band that I want to make this short about, they're called Kitten. And so over March and April, I think it was, I designed this chef character that I will need for the opening scenes of the Kitten short. For whatever reason, I really struggled with his design in a way that I don't normally. The first version, I had his 3/4 view, like leaning kind of too far forward. So then I way overcorrected and had him just leaning back. Goldilocks here got it just right on the 3rd try, and I popped on a little hat. Yeah, I really like how he turned out eventually. Around that same time, I started looking at Teddy's design again. At first, I was just tweaking little bits and making the design kind of more solid. And then I started feeling like his design is missing something. It's just a little bit boring. So I started looking at giving him a different hat. I really wanted to give him a hood. I think it looks good, but I didn't like the way that it was interacting with his hair back here, which I like didn't want to change. So in the end, I just had a shirt poking at the end of his jacket, like Hey Arnold. And I think it works, like gives them just like a little bit more visual interest. I have to say though, seeing the hood now, I would really like to try and make that work. But if I keep going back to these characters and redesigning them, I'm never going to make any forward progress. So I'm simply going to make myself stop looking and forget about what I've seen here today. This was a good year for Kitten. I didn't work on it super consistently, but when I did, like, I got a lot done. In May, I drew like a bunch of these props. It was just stuff I knew I needed and kind of hadn't visualized it before. So I was like, right, let's just figure out what this looks like. You can spend so long thinking about it that you never actually do it. So it's kind of, the first draft is just like, do something and then we can figure it out. I think like most of the stuff is pretty good. His amp is probably too nice. It's a Vox AC30, which I've wanted for like 15 years. So I was kind of just like, he can have the amp that I can't afford. I just think for kids in a band, I probably need to simplify that. But I really like everything else. And the drum kit in particular was like a cool challenge because drum kits are so complicated and there's so many parts. And I was really trying to simplify it in a way that felt cohesive with the other props, but not have it be like so simple that it didn't fit the world anymore. And I say that because like I looked at a bunch of animated shows to see how they have handled drum kits and how they've simplified them, and some of them abstracted it to the point that it like wouldn't have suited what I'm trying to do, but also barely resembled a drum kit anymore. So I think I struck like a good balance, and I'm really happy with how that looks. Yeah. In July, I took on a commission that I wasn't super enthusiastic about, but I wanted the money, to be fully honest. It was a poster for a comedy gig. His name was John. He came to me with the idea, basically fully formed. He had a sketch and everything, and I just like added little bits to it. You know, I still worked just as hard on it as all the other stuff and gave it my full attention while I was working on it. I just kind of don't love the end result, but I am including it because it is something that I made this year, and I think something about how like, you know, it's not the best thing that I've ever drawn, but they can't all be, but I'm fine. It's fine. We move on. In August, I made a battery charging station so that I'd have somewhere to charge all my batteries for my cameras and my lights and microphones. And it turned out great. I use it all the time and it's super handy. I also made a video documenting the whole thing. And mostly the purpose of that video was just like, I hadn't uploaded in a year. Somehow it just kind of got away from me, you know? And I was wanting to just kind of shake off the cobwebs and get back into it and start to be a bit more consistent. And I think this is the 5th video that I've made since I did that. So yeah, great project, great success. In September, I drew for the first time in months and it felt weird. I was in a real creative lull. And all it was like adding something to a drawing that I'd done a year or two previous. I had drawn Robocop without his helmet because I thought the 80s prosthetics had his head looking so wide. It was really funny. So I got prints made and they just didn't do that well. And I kind of wondered like, if I gave him his helmet and he looked more recognizably like Robocop, would it do any better? And no, it doesn't seem to have. I've only been to a couple of little art markets with it, so maybe it's too early to tell. You know, every so often, I don't know, a drawing you do gets in front of the right people and they really seem to like it. It's kind of a little reminder of like, maybe it hasn't found the right Robocop loving audiences as much as I love it. Maybe the people who follow me just don't love Robocop that much. I don't know. We'll see in the new year. Maybe the prints will do better. If I get into Comic-Con, maybe there'll be big love for the Robocop print. Who knows? In October, I designed my Taskmaster outfit and I made a video showing how I did it. The joke kind of being, when I'm allowed on the show, finally, this is what I'm going to wear. And it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And around then, a new season was just starting on TV. So I figured like, okay, perfect time to do it. And yeah, I really like how the outfit came out and I really like how the video turned out. And I got a couple of thousand views, which is a lot for me. Like it's not in the grand scheme of things, but it is for me. And it seems like the people who saw it really liked it. So that was cool. As it was coming up to Halloween, I decided to make a short TikTok reel showing off how I animated myself turning into a zombie the year before. I meant to do this at the time. All the footage was there, like ready to go, but I just never got around to it. But once I did this year, I think it took me a couple of hours all in to like put it together. Would have been a real waste and a shame if I never got around to doing that. So I'm really glad I did this year. In November, I built some shelves for a hot press so that we could store our towels. And I used scraps of our floors to make them. And I also recorded a video and showed off the whole thing. And I was kind of aware that it's not like a massively sexy viral idea, you know, for a video. But the whole point of making videos this year wasn't even really to have anybody watch them. It was kind of just to get better at doing it and get back into it and kind of figure out a process that works for me. And I did. Like I figured out a way of scripting that works for me. And I'm a little bit better at like editing that type of video, and I messed around with a bunch of different microphones. Like this is my first time using a lapel mic. I hope it sounds good. Yeah, I am better at making them now, you know, and that was the whole point. And obviously as I continue it, I still hope to improve, but also going forward now, it would be pretty cool if people started watching. In late November, I made a gift for my girlfriend for our 6th year anniversary. It is a case for an emergency supply of chocolate, and I made a video about it too. They both turned out great. Honestly, don't have a lot to say about it. It's my favorite thing that I've made this year. At the end of November, I drew this poster for DCAF, the comics event that I mentioned earlier. We just needed something to briefly explain why our events are still masked. Basically, there are people in the community who are at risk, and it ensures that they can safely attend. And that's it. And for the most part, people get it, and there's never any issues. It's an act of compassion and solidarity, and I'm proud that we do it. So that's a poster that I drew for that. I spent this year working as an animation team lead on a show called Isadora Moon, which is about a little girl who's half fairy and half vampire. And so a bunch of the crew decided to get together and make a zine on that topic, fairies and vampires. So I chose to draw a Banshee, which is a fairy or like a spirit in Irish folklore. And I don't know too much about them really, other than like they're said to be seen crying and combing their hair, and their wailing is said to herald the death of a family member. I kind of don't love the final result, which, you know, it sucks to say because I had high hopes when I was in the middle of it. I like the line work for the most part. Don't love how I drew the trees, but we had 4 months to do it, and I pretty much left it until the final 4 days. So the fact that I did anything at all is kind of a miracle. But I'm just not good with color, and I'm especially not good with anything that has to be like atmospheric. And so doing this nighttime lighting, I don't know. I'm not the person to do it. I don't know why I chose something so like serious. I should have done something kind of goofy and silly, but whatever. I might look back in 6 months and be like, okay, but right now, I don't know. I just don't love it. I thought that's all I was going to get done this year, and then I got sick in the lead up to Christmas and had a lot of time on my hands, and so I designed some grandparents for Whit. And like I said earlier, these are our first draft, so they're likely to change, especially because I'm in a bit of an awkward position where he kind of looks like my granda, but that's not my nana. So one of them has to change because that's not right. And also, while I was sick, I drew some of my favorite Dean Pelton outfits from Community, and I think it looks really good. I did a colored version, but it looked real bad, so I'm just focusing on the line work for now. I might get prints made of it next year. I think even like line work, I did it big enough to be A3, so even at that scale, it would look kind of striking and kind of cool. That is pretty much everything that I finished this year. I probably started some drawings that never quite made it, and wrote some half songs for the band and some other bits and bobs, but that's more or less everything. Before I looked back at this year, I really had this sense that I just didn't do anything, and turns out like I did quite a lot. We spent the first probably 3 or 4 months of the year getting our house ready to move into, and that was like every evening and weekend for just months. A week or two after we moved in, my dad went into hospital, and that was like a very scary time, and he's like doing a lot better now, thankfully. But yeah, for 2 months I would like go to work and then immediately go visit him in the hospital, and then I would come home and eat dinner and go to bed. There wasn't a whole lot of time or brain space to like do anything, you know? But also making things gives me a sense of well-being and a sense of self and a sense of purpose. And obviously like it's important enough to me that I managed to carve out some time somewhere to make a load of stuff. I don't really have any concrete plans for next year. I would like to animate a couple of bits. I would like to keep making videos. I would like to work more on the short, get some more of the rigs done, maybe really get stuck into the storyboarding. I know I spent a lot of time just now talking about it, but I have to say I'm kind of reluctant to talk about it in case it never comes to fruition. I'm kind of, I tend not to do that. I kind of like talk about stuff when it's mostly done. So yeah, this isn't really like me, but I'm just kind of psyched on it and worked a lot on it this year, and I don't know how psyched made it into my vocabulary, but unfortunately it has, and I will spend the next year trying to get rid of it. I suppose my other big goal is that I would really love to build a workshop in our back garden, and it's going to be expensive, and I'm going to do it myself, so it's going to be like a challenge, but I think it's going to be fun. Really, I think it comes down to how much money I can save. It might have to be the year after next and not next year, which kind of hurts to say. I would love for it to be, you know, the summer of 2024. So anyway, that's everything. Give me a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you're not already. And at the very least, come back in 12 months because I'll do this again. We'll see how I got on in 2024. We'll see if any of this stuff came to fruition, what kind of year I've had. Cheers. Thanks.